on this kind of stuff. And so I think it's incredibly relevant to actually wonder, why is brand important? Not, does brand matter? That's what? That's a crazy premise.
Yeah.
That's an absolute insane premise to me. Does brand matter? Yeah. I don't know. Does water matter?
Yeah.
Very vague question, but it definitely matters, right? So it's not about whether brand matters or not. It's about whether you understand what goes into a brand. So I've decided to come up with a couple of different ways of talking about it. But first, I need a marker. Hold on. And just to be clear, normally I would use a black marker because everything else is coloring. But I think the black marker is always add ink. So what I think the issue is not that people don't like brand, right? Or even that people don't want to know brand. I think the issue is that it means a sense of reflection and doing work that otherwise feels meaningless if you don't understand its intention, right? Just like any work. Any work without intention feels meaningless because it is, right? Now, unfortunately, people conflate the idea that if you have good intention, it's always good outcome. And so they say, oh, well, my intentions were correct. Well, yeah, but in my opinion, maturity is when you recognize that your intention is your choice, but then the outcome is actually out of your control, but you still take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And so I think what a lot of people need to do when they're trying to discover their business or why their business seems to be stagnating, and by the way, this doesn't mean that things are going poorly. I'm just saying stagnation, maybe it's in your membership, sure. But maybe the stagnation is in the motivation of your employees to work hard. Maybe it's in the stagnation of new people. You have this core set that seems to almost keep other people away. I've seen that happen a bunch. Maybe it's that you're personally losing motivation, and because of that, it's stressing you out so much that you're having to put on a show all day to try to pretend that you like what you're building, even though you don't like what you're building. But if you tell anybody that, now suddenly you just lost your team, which is your support system. And now there's people's livelihoods at stake. And now suddenly it's not that you don't think brand is real. It's that you don't want to take the time to go look at it because you know it's going to be murky, right? What I like to say recently is that brands aren't created. They can be, but the good ones aren't created, they're excavated, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first attempt at explaining the same thing in two ways. Maybe three, but we're going to start with two. And I think, just like Flex is built for three, right? It's built for builders that are just building, brand builders, and business builders, right? These are all builders, but their intentions are different. And so I think if I can clarify, rather than try to say all three at once, which I think is maybe the only way I've ever heard it, and what I'm about to say I don't think has necessarily been said in this way before. I'm sure it's been said in a ton of ways, in other people's languages and their favorite mediums. But what I think I'm going to try to do is, rather than try to explain it to everybody, I'm going to start with the brand. And then I'm going to take it from the perspective of the business owner and the perspective of the builder. Because I think that sometimes we think that all of those are the same person, and sometimes they are, and I actually think that that's the issue. I don't think it's that they don't believe in brand. I don't think it's that they don't know what they're doing. I think that their intentions are clear, and they're not realizing that there's just a part of the machine missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put brand in the middle, because that's what I believe in. Is that visible?
Yeah.
Cool. So brand. I'm going to oversimplify it, but I do think that there's some key components. Mission, and I'm going to use the words that are heard all the time, vision, because I think that makes it easier to understand. Core values, and that you'll hear a lot, okay?
Hey, Joe, I think you could clear up a little bit on what an actual mission, vision, and core values are. Main reason I say that is I don't think a lot of people really understand what those are. They just say them because they're used a lot in verbiage and they're popular. That was the entire point of this also.
Mitch, really good question, man. All right, so I'll just kind of briefly go over it, and I usually like to approach this with questions. So for mission, it's what's the problem that you're just obsessed with solving right now for somebody, right? So that's kind of the mission of your business. Then your vision is basically in a perfect world, what does success actually look like? What is the end result of what you're working towards? And then the core values are kind of what are the principles that are non-negotiable in the way that you do business. I hope that helps, but I can definitely send you some more. The other part is a target audience that you'll hear a little bit less. You'll see it in the books, but a lot of people talk about other things, and those other things that they talk about, what are they? Logos, colors, fonts,
Identity, brand identity.
brand identity. Okay, so we have mission, vision, core values, target audience, identity. And I honestly think that you could probably start there. Now, I am going to break it down further to talk about the roles inside of this, but I think what's important to recognize is that all of the visual parts of your brand are all just in here.
Yeah,
right?
which
These
is a
are
small
ideas.
subset of a brand.
Right? Like these are ideas, and this is a target, right? So like idea, goal, identity. Suddenly we're crafting a person here, even though it looks like a brand, right? And then I'm going to add the thing that I like to believe, right? So this is maybe not said as much and maybe isn't true, but it's where I'm at right now in my understanding of brand. And that's actually, let me do this. Ideas. If we want it to be great, it's a unique idea or multiple, okay? So in my opinion, here is what makes up a brand, okay? From strictly an asset perspective, meaning that these are the ingredients. If we were going to build this thing mise en place, these would have to be on the table. Now, who works on brand, okay? So that, I'm going to come over here, I think. And I'm going to say, well, those are builders, okay? And with builders come in different shapes and sizes. And in my opinion, again, there will be a brand builder that is in charge of all of this, right? And I call them the brand owner, but they're the technical person that's building the brand, just like a business owner builds the business, right? And that should be their primary role, but that's when we get to roles. So let's talk about the roles within a brand that, in my opinion, embody what a builder is. So in here, we have a maker. The maker's role is to basically curate or create raw and refined ingredients. We're just going to leave it there for now. Next one, designer, okay? The designer looks at the raw materials and the refined materials, and they also look at the budget and the understanding of the audience and the identity and the mission, vision, and core values and the unique ideas. And they take this refined product, the refined raw ingredient from the maker, and they design an experience. And what that experience is a touch point between a brand. Is this still on here?
Yeah.
And their audience. Okay? So the target audience right here is the same here. Same thing, I just split it out so we could talk about how they communicate, okay? But the designer creates experiences guided by the mission, vision, and core values to communicate the unique ideas to a target audience with a specific identity. And then we have the third role, the architect. The architect is responsible for taking the designer's design and recognizing what raw materials are available and what need to be purchased and what need to be further refined and what need to be assembled, and sometimes even goes back and tells the designer, hey, we need some more things made, or we need some more things curated, or we need some better raw material before I can assemble what we need. But the architect's main mission is to bring the designer's experience to the real world and make it accessible for people. Who are they making it accessible for? The target audience. So in a very real way, architects take the raw materials from the maker directly using the designer's design and following the mission, vision, and core values of the company, take the unique ideas and bring them to life for the target audience to consume. So, what kind of audience is over here? So, there's one over here I'm just going to leave blank for now. Okay, so the one I'm leaving out is actually what I referred to in the video as the transactional audience, but now I'm realizing that's just the customer audience. So, small refinement. But then there's two other ones. One is your promotional audience, one is your supportive audience. And what those people do is they listen. They listen to the ideas that the architect brought to life using the design of the designer and the materials of the maker. And if that idea resonates, this audience has an opportunity to transact, the transactional audience. Now, the transactional audience can transact in different ways. The most widely understood and adopted way is commerce, right? Like, I'm going to pay you, and you're going to give me a good or service. But that's actually very business specific. There's actually a different commerce going on in the transactional market without even talking about business, just with the people on the board right here and the brand. The transactional audience are people that give you their time and their attention to consume your unique ideas. And what's beautiful about that is that that is basically the nod of the target audience to admit to you that what you're saying resonates. It may not be ready to be bought yet, but it resonates. And so
Yeah,
it
I liked
builds.
how you said consume. So transactional is almost consumers. And most people think of consumers as buyers, but people consume content without purchasing
Correct.
and identify with the brand.
Correct. And we'll get to what the promotional and the supportive do, but for right now, just understand that there's three different audiences. And what is happening is as the brand gets stronger, meaning it has a better mission and vision, a more clear mission and vision, it understands its target audience and it evolves. It takes its identity and it makes it better each day. But it's almost like having a placeholder. It doesn't have to be perfect to start. It just has to be there. You can make a cake with all the ingredients, but you're going to have some substitutes, right? Like you can't not use anything if you're allergic to eggs and you want to make a cake, you can't just not put egg. You got to put a substitute in its place. And in my opinion, if you lack one of these things in your business, you're suddenly just actually, and this is where I'm going to say things in a different way, from a brand's perspective, if your business lacks these things, you will never be able to resonate with an audience that's not going to transact with you. And what do I mean by an audience that doesn't transact with you? Well, I know for a fact that there are people out there that tell people to use my product that don't use it themselves. Now, does that make them fake? No. Does it make them inauthentic? No. It's just that they're not actually my transactional audience. They just believe in my mission and vision. And so what they do is they go around and they find other people to be a part of your transactional audience because they believe in what you're doing. Those are the people that go on Instagram and they go, listen, I don't run a gym, but if I did, I would use level method. Right? I do that. Because in my opinion, I don't need to run a gym to be promotional for a company that has a really good mission vision, understands their core values, and understands the unique ideas that they're bringing to their audience. I don't need to spend money with you to be incredibly important to the longevity of your business. That's promotional. Now let's talk about supportive. The supportive audience, their role is to be in the room when the person's about to make a decision. So when the person who's about to make the buying decision, the transactional, then that could be, again, their time and attention. But when they're ready to make a transaction, we all have that friend. We all have that friend that we don't ask direct questions to because we're worried about how blunt they're going to be with their answers, and sometimes they make us feel silly. My creative friends are like that. Like sometimes I ask my creative friends questions and they kind of just look at me like, "Are you serious?" And I get a little insecure because I'm like, "Man, I wish I have had better language in that moment to ask what I was really looking for." But luckily they give me grace. They give me the benefit of the doubt and they explain things to me. And I think what the supportive audience is, in the most straightforward way that I know, is, you know how you got that tech buddy that you always ask, "Hey, is this the right thing? Is this the right cord? Is this the right USB? Is this going to work with my net? Hey, is this going to fit in my car? Am I going to be able to take this places? Does this do the one thing that I needed to do, man? It says 17 features on their site, but I only needed to do one, and I haven't read the exact phrase that makes the perfect sense to me. Can you just validate that?" Now, what they don't realize in that moment is that you're actually someone who's learned this thing and absorbed this stuff so that it is a very easy decision for you to be able to say, "Yeah, don't get this one, it doesn't have the right HDMI," or "Don't get this one, it's not powered. Don't get this one, you don't understand the batteries that they use for that, they don't make those anymore. Oh, the Wi-Fi network is actually not going to be able to access that because you only have 2 accessible ports, and that's going to require a third one, and they don't even offer that in your building." And they want to pay you very little for that because of how quickly it came out of your mouth. But that's not the point. The point is it took you years to get all that information. And so these supportive people tend to be the builders themselves, because they're the people that don't need to be told. They're the people that absorb information, your mission and vision, critically think about your unique ideas, and if you win them over, they're the ones that tip over the transactional audience. So while people like to think, and I always like to think of things in some scientific terms because I think it helps people bridge the gap between this creative stuff, right? And so primers and catalysts. The promotional audience can be both a primer, meaning that it can get an audience ready to buy something or ready to transact in any way, time and attention, whatever. The supportive audience can be a primer or a catalyst. The promotional audience tends to just be catalytic because we've heard them say the same things. So they're the friend that's every time they get a new toy, they tell everybody, or every time their friend gets a new car, they have to make a piece of content about it. Those people are not bad. They're just promoters. They're like the club promoters who never actually go inside the clubs that they promote. They just know if they get enough people in the door, they get some money, and that's their livelihood, and that's okay. That doesn't make them bad people at all. That's what they do. They're promotional people. They tend to embody your brand
and
without
so
you realizing it.
Sample of the nightclub, right? The catalyst could be your friend that says, "Yeah, let's go to that club. I heard about it," right? Whereas you were primed for it because you saw the flyer and you're like, "There's this cool thing.
Correct.
I don't know if I should go or not." And then your catalyst is the catalyst is the one who puts you over the edge to make the decision. Where a promotional audience, the priming that you're saying, it puts the idea in your head, but then you need a catalyst to make the actual transaction happen. So, yeah. Okay.
Right. Totally. And when you look at the promotional and the supportive, they can both be primers and they can both be catalysts. And what do I mean by that? Well, the supportive friend does tend to be more catalytic than primers, but the supportive friend is the one that walks into the room and says, I just saw this ad for a company, and if I was going to go with a company, like, they would be the one. They're just saying it casually. They're not actually promoting it in a sense. But your friends look up to them. That, in my opinion, that's true influence. True influence is not knowing the best thing to do. It's knowing the best way to communicate the unique idea to the target audience. And you know who that tends to be? Builders who build products for themselves because they have the builder's eye. And they go, "Oh, yeah, I would never buy that laptop, but it's the best one." And they go, "Oh, well, why wouldn't you buy it?" And it's like, well, maybe it's out of their price range. Maybe it's not the right tool for the job, but you wouldn't know that because you don't actually know about tech, and that's okay. But there are people that do know about tech, and they can bridge these gaps very simply, right? So this primers and catalyst thing is going to come back in a minute when we actually talk about what's missing here, this layer of business. But so far, we've talked about the people, the roles that have to go into this. Now, what you will find in this community is that these people just love to work. They're inspired by work. They're inspired by other people to try to bring unique ideas to life. That's what they love to do. All of these people. These people do it physically. These people do it in their heads. These people do it with their hands. So incredible. All of them. But what they need is a brand owner. Because the brand owner's responsibility is to be so clear on everything to do with the brand that whether this is one person, 3 people, or 1,400 distributed across different networks, that they're so clear on all of this that the work itself is always on brand, and therefore the products and services that will one day be sold to the transactional audience will be on brand. The question is, what are they actually selling? Well, it's the only product that in my idea, in my concept, that basically gives you a transactional thing, which is it's the communication of mission. You're selling an idea. So these guys are building, and with a brand owner's direction, they're working in lockstep to make sure that your unique ideas are communicated so well to an audience that the audience will accept them, and in return, they'll give you time and attention. No money transacted here. You know what this is? This is every personal brand that hasn't monetized yet. Except in their world, they're the maker, designer, and architect of everything that they do. And that's why I believe that to have a brand, you need 2 people. Not that you need it because it's the absolute, and I don't like speaking in absolutes, because if you don't have someone who's responsible for making sure that the communication of the mission is in line, they're like the last curator. This is the final cut, right? In movies, this person's got the final cut. They get to decide if everything that came out of the builder actually reflects all of this so that the communication can be sold to a transactional audience, but also delivered to a promotional and supportive audience who will never transact. And for all of those Gary V lovers out there, jab, right hook. Here it is. This is the math of it. He was right. But this is what he meant. Supportive, promotional, transactional, because not everybody gives you money. But they're all kind of giving you some attention. And so we want to push them into the transactional. I try to leave them out so you can recognize that they're not in commerce, because this is what the business cares about.
Right.
This is actually, unfortunately, all the business cares about
So
in some instances.
Going off the Gary
right?
V thing real
So,
quick, because I think I'm
Sure.
starting to understand this, where, when he talks about jab, right hook, it's like offer value, and then ask for the sale. But what you're saying is, so the communication of mission could be that offering a value. You're offering ideas like, hey, like with Flex, we believe that building brands is important, and here's how to build a brand. You're not asking them to sign up for Flex. You're just like giving free advice on building a brand, and that's hitting influencers, and that's hitting the supportive. And so then when I have a friend who's like, I'm starting a company and I need to build a brand, it's like, man, you should check out this Flex thing. I've been watching these videos on it. Like, I haven't used it yet because I'm not building a business or a brand right now. But it sounds like I really like what they stand for, and it sounds like this is something that would work for you. So when it's not just taking your mission statement and pasting that on every social media. It's the content that is aligned with your core values and mission statement. It's not literal in the mission statement, but people understand your mission through the content and that they're consuming and deliver. They get you. They understand it almost intrinsically, so it's easy for them to talk.
It's because it was done
intention and purpose.
with intention.
Yes.
That's the whole idea. This right here is what you need. But what you're doing is you're taking the purpose and you're making an intentional plan, and you're working by your core values so that when a business comes along.
Well, and as you're building this out real quick, this is why when we hired you to build the Level Method website, we thought like, hey, this is what we want. And the first thing you're like is, no, we're going to start with what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your core values, who's your target audiences. Like you started with all this with us when we're thinking like, oh, well, we just need some updated colors and pictures, and here's our logo, and we need to get them to buy our product. And you're like, no. Let's take a step back. Because
yeah, it's the equivalent of walking into a gym and saying, I know that I have a hip joint issue, so here's the protocol that I want. And they're like, whoa. Like, I don't even know you.
And for us in this journey of what we were creating together, when we saw the iteration of the website, it made so much sense to everybody without having to explain this page is this page is that, because our mission, vision, and core values are represented in everything that we do, that then ties to an eventual call to action for the transactional. But you have to get there through the mission, vision, and core values. And our website is so much clearer now. Instead of just describing the product, it really is about what our communication of what we're trying to do. So website, people think it's like just a poster of your business, or it has information, but you're trying to flip that on its head, and it's like, no, this is your communication vehicle of your brand to all of these audiences. You have to, like, it's not just
Correct.
here's an offer is one component of your websites, but most people think like that's what I got to put out there so people know what to buy. But if you're missing out communicating to the primer and the catalyst, you're totally missing out on the whole picture of what is a brand. And and by the way, some businesses are just transactional. They just sell widgets on Amazon.
Oh, well,
and that's
what
perfect.
I can, and this is what I can explain right here, right? Because some people go, well, brand isn't necessary. And the first thing I'll do is correct that sentence. A strong brand isn't necessary for a short-term
transactional business. Yeah.
So if you're thinking in short terms, hey, I want to do something and flip it, this is where you find the complete disconnect of a brand and business, because they're not really doing it they're doing it by the seat of their pants. Now, sometimes people get lucky and they happen to be good innately. And that innate goodness that they feel, and by the way, I don't mean people are innately good. I mean that their actions are intentional, and therefore they tend to act in a positive manner that ends up communicating their unique ideas without identity. You are the identity. This is a personal brand. But the question becomes, how do you monetize it? In my opinion, if we start business first, you're kind of setting yourself up with a very slippery foundation. You're basically not building the core of what it takes to when you get burnt out, or somebody at your company, or something happens in the market that drastically changes, like with the pace of technology right now. Because what happens is if you built the right brand and you've built up this audience, the only thing that changes is the transactional. And I'm going to redraw audience after this, because the clearer image is one that doesn't include all of this stuff. But let me just talk real quick about business. So what does a business do? A business makes money. That's just a fact, at least in the United States. So the whole concept of a business is to make money. Now, why you're making money is completely up to you. But you got to make money. It's the whole point. So what they do as a business organization or company, right? This is a company. This is when you start getting accounting and all of these other things that are involved in a company. But I'm going to kind of keep it streamlined so we can see what the offer is here. But right here, what you need to do is you need to look at this column right here and say, these are my offers. And you need clarity on offers in the same way that you need clarity on mission and vision, because what you're quite literally selling is the communication of the unique idea through an offer to make somebody transact. And this is where you have the goods and services. Right? So the goods and services take the unique ideas of the brand, filter them through a product or service to a transactional audience. And in return, they give you money. No money, no money, no money. Bigger audience. Money, smaller audience. That is not to say that it's the least impactful or least important audience. It's just to recognize that it is the smallest. It is a portion of what the business people would say is your total addressable market. So we talk about this concept of total addressable market at a certain level of business because that's how you know what your potential revenue is. And I say, you're thinking too small. What you're really looking for is a total addressable market that believes in the mission you're on. Because then it doesn't matter what the vehicle is. The vehicle can change tomorrow, but there's such a big audience that is promoting and supporting whatever ideas come out of the mission, vision, and the unique ideas and the identity of the company, thus put forth from a brand owner's perspective through a business's resources to be able to produce more money to ideally support the mission. But if you don't have a mission, it's just to support a company, and I look at it as the equivalent of buying a building because you can't wait to start a business, and then you fill it with nothing. And you still have an electricity bill and rent and sewage and taxes and all, and you go, oh man, okay, well I gotta make sure I pay for this stuff. So how am I gonna do it? I gotta sell something. All right, well, I don't care. Let's sell donuts at the front door because everybody that walks by the building goes to work at a place down the block, and if they buy donuts, then we'll have enough money to keep the lights on. And you go, great, but why are you selling donuts? And like, well, to keep the lights on. You're like, but what are you keeping the lights on for? Well, so I can have my business. Well, what does your business do? It sells donuts. Do you see how cyclical that can be? The problem is that one day, the last nerve will break when the employee that promised you they wouldn't be late, this one day that you just needed them to be there, calls in sick and ruins something that you've been working on for 3 years to try to get the business to be okay because you got to figure out the best way to sell donuts. And the only way to sell donuts is to do this one thing, and now the person didn't do it. And now what do? You fire them. How could you not be here on time? You promised me you'd be here on time. You know what the worker's actually thinking? I don't even know why I'm coming here. And you know what? Neither do you, business owner. You're just so caught up in the fact that you need to keep the lights on for some reason that you don't understand because you never took the time to realize that you're working for something. Go figure it out. There's some way you think that's going to happen. Go figure that out. And there's certain ideals that need to be maintained while you're working on it, or else you're never going to be able to communicate its value to an audience. So you focus on here. This can be one person, maker, designer, and architect. How do I know that? I am one. This can be one person. And in many cases, this can be the same person. But I'm telling you this, to have this, you need two. Because someone needs to make sure that when you are off seeing the vision 4 years from now, someone's keeping you in reality because someone's got to keep the lights on to make sure your mission is supported. This person does not have to be anything savvy. They just have to choose you every day. And then, with those two people, or more, you can then position to a business, whether it be the one that you hope to work for or the one that you hope acquires your ideas one day to sell to an audience that is yours, that you will then communicate the value of. This is when you need at least one more person, right? It just makes sense. Because now, one person's doing the things, one person's making sure that the communication of those things is getting to the right people in the right way, and one person's making sure the lights stay on. That's the best way that I can explain the difference between a brand and a business, is the acknowledgement that everybody's got a brand as soon as you have a business, because you actually can't have a business without a brand. You may not have the visual identity that you want. You may not have a logo. But I know you're talking to somebody, you have a target audience because you're selling them things. You may lack a mission, vision, and core values to write down on paper, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. They just happen to be yours and they're innate and you haven't excavated to figure out what they are yet. You have an identity, you just may not like it, and your unique idea is probably the reason these people are buying from you. So if you have a business right now and you realize that you're lacking brand, you're not out of luck. You just got to start this excavation process to figure out why what you're doing is communicated and resonating so well with this target audience. And the best way to do that is not through a website. It's not through ads. It's not through podcasts. It's not through social media. It's talk to them. And the second you get scared because you don't know what you're doing over here, because you never took the time to excavate here, makes you silo yourself and never tell anybody about your stuff. You just build. You build because you know you're on a mission to solve something for someone, and maybe something for yourself, and maybe something you love. But somebody told you one day that you don't know how to communicate it to people. Now, they may have said it in a meaner way, right? They may have said, you know what you're doing, it's never going to work. It already exists. I could go on and on. What they're actually saying is, I don't think you clearly communicate your unique value to me yet. Or possibly, I'm not your target audience. So if you're building a company and your parents and friends and all these people that are going to have input, whether you like it or not, are not in your target audience, make sure they know that before they start giving you all kinds of feedback. Because they're telling you who your mission, vision, and core values are, but that may not actually be the brand. Because the brand needs to exist on its own with or without you. You need to recognize that you are not the brand. The brand is its own entity. Get into it with a partner. And then when you're ready to start a business, you could just find a third person, call in somebody you know. This is where a mentor makes sense. But I'm telling you, somebody's got to make sure this is working. Somebody got to make sure this is working. And someone's got to make sure this is working. And that's why on Flex, you can't start a business unless you give me 3 names. That's why you can't start a brand without 2 people, not because it's not possible, because I don't think it's healthy for you. Because what happens in the excavation process is dirty, grimy stuff. Because you look at your own morals when you're going through stuff and you go, wow, I didn't realize that for the past 5 years, I've actually been serving a customer base that I don't really believe in. They just happen to be the one that pays me the most, and that's what keeps the lights on. I don't know how to get away from them. You know how you do that? You tell them. You don't tell them that you're not for them, right? You say, hey, I think I have this other vision. My mission's the same. I still have the same core values. And I'm trying to see if you're a part of the new target audience with this new vision. Because the power of brand is that you can take this vision and you can change it in an instant. And if everything else is there, you're okay. That's why it's powerful. And that's why Apple can put their name on anything and people would pre-sign up for it. It doesn't matter what the material or the manifestation. It's the mission.